welcome to Shades in Justice podcast. You can always reach me at www.drevelynheal.net. And we have with us today some very wonderful guests, Dr. Mary Clifford, who has been on our show a couple times, and so has Allison Fay, both in Minneapolis, St. Cloud, Minnesota. There we go. And all the way from Oklahoma, we have Carolyn Stampley. So we are excited to have an interstate conversation today around community health and how our culture kind of affects the health of our communities. So before I get started, I'm going to allow each of you ladies to just share a little bit about you and your passion, and then we'll dig right in. We'll start with Dr. Clifford.
So my name is Mary Clifford, and I teach in the Criminal Justice Department at St. Cloud State. I'm currently the interim lead organizer for the Community Anti-Racism Education Initiative, which is a little bit of a mouthful, but we're working to kind of understand better how race and racialization and the history of race and cultural facts get represented in the current and future conversations. And so my colleague Alison and I put together a book in a class that we were working in together, and we had some questions about the existing content that was out there, about the frame of reference that was used for how we talk about and think about sexual assault, sexual crime, sexual health, sexual wellness, and how perpetrators and victims sometimes get separated, but in real life, sometimes they're in the same family, or they're at the same school, or they're in the same social situation. And so how do we have a conversation that includes kind of that reality of things, as opposed to kind of siloing the content and conversations? And so it was a long way around to say we decided we would try our hand at putting together a text that includes some attention to some of those things in a way that hadn't been done before. So here we are.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Clifford. It has always been enlightening and a pleasure to talk with you and Allison around some of those issues. And I can't wait for us to dig in again on tonight. Okay, Miss Allison.
Hi there, I'm Allison Fay. I work as the director of Jacob Wetterling Resource Center, which is sort of the prevention arm of a larger nonprofit called Zero Abuse Project. And Zero Abuse Project, we're working to end child abuse in all of its forms. And so I'm really proud to be on a team of professionals and advocates who think that we can end child abuse, and let's move forward and let's do that. Let's equip families, let's equip professionals, let's make sure kids are served in policy as well as in intervention. And so that is the lens. I went and got my master's degree at St. Cloud State, and Dr. Clifford was my professor, and I approached her after class, was like, can we talk about these textbooks that are the ones that are available to us? And we had a great chat and sort of launched my research in working to get some additional resources that are more victim-centered. I just get frustrated. It feels like we're always celebrating the offender. Like, do you know this serial killer's name? Like, do you know his victims? Let's talk about that. So that's sort of the lens that I come from, and glad to be with you, glad to learn from you, and glad to meet you, Carolyn, as well.
Thank you, Miss Allison. And like I said earlier, it's always a pleasure working with you and talking with you. When I get done talking with you two ladies, I always feel like we need more. You know, it's like we just can't hardly stop it. So this has been wonderful. And so we'll be digging in just a minute. And Miss Carolyn Stampley, would you share a little bit about you?
Okay, first of all, I'd like to say hello, ladies. I am Carolyn Stampley. I am a mother and a grandmother. I work for, most people hate to hear me say this, I work for the Oklahoma Student Loan Authority. Anything with student loans, they want to cut you off right away. But I am a secretary for the Oklahoma Student Loan Authority. I write, I am a storyteller, and most of all, I'm just interested because I have children and grandchildren. So I'm so interested in the topics that you all are bringing forth. So I'm an interested listener more than anything else.
Thank you, Miss Carolyn Stampley. And again, I'd like to say welcome to each of you, and we're going to jump right in. I want to say thanks to Kathleen for being willing to just listen in and be a part of the audience on today. So our first question I'd like to dig into is, as we talk about community health, there are so many areas we could talk about. American culture includes some very positive history as well as some very disturbing attributes. So as we begin our conversation today, let's begin by stating some of the positive effects in our culture that you have experienced.
Oh my gosh. I just feel like that I'm overwhelmed by the question because there are so many, the idea that I have a PhD is unthinkable. And in years past, the idea that I moved outside of the hometown I grew up in, I mean, it just seems like there are so many ways that you can explore your talents and visions if you have access to certain kinds of things. And I've been really lucky to do a little bit of traveling, and I've been really lucky to just stay in this profession and explore countries around the world and content areas and the whole, I don't know, it just feels like I've been really lucky in life. And so all of that would not have been possible depending on, where I was born and what the conditions and circumstances were. And so there's been a lot of opportunity here for me, for sure.
I love that question, because when I'm chatting with high schoolers about healthy relationships or online safety, I don't want to be the sad tuba noise, like wah wah, coming in and being like, you're all the there are wonderful reasons why kids are in relationships. There are wonderful reasons why we learn about who we are by being in a relationship with other people, friends, and romantic relationships. We learn about the world through the internet. I think of the kid in St. Cloud, Minnesota in the 1990s who may not have had access to knowing that even just GLBTQIA plus culture, is something wrong with me? No, you just didn't, there wasn't that sense of what is out there. So, but everything, as you know, there's the pros and cons to it, right? The internet, when in 1990, we're at a 60% recovery rate for finding missing people. We're now at 97.5%. And a big part of that is with the internet, but we also know the internet has just continues to climb in the amount of reports that they have of kids being mistreated and harmed. And so it's sort of and so look, I already bring in the negative in the first question. Sorry. But just the idea of there are wonderful things we learn in relationships. There are wonderful things we learn through education. There are wonderful things on the internet. There are wonderful opportunities that we have. And so how do we help be the guardrails for our kids so that they can have these friendships, have these romantic relationships, seek out the world, but I don't want to sound disrespectful, bumper bowling, when you're a little kid and you're we need to be helping our kids with those bumpers so that they can have those experiences, but still be safe. And I'm not comparing children to bowling balls, so don't send me that. I'm just trying to use a metaphor.
Okay, that's good. I understand the challenge with just keeping it positive. But we all have experienced some very wonderful, positive things in our lives. And so that's why I wanted to start off with that. Sister Carolyn, would you like to tap in on that?
I do. I agree with both of these ladies. It seems to me that we are products of our environment, and the people and the things that we are around, that's what brings goodness and joy and love and peace to the community. We are the joy, the love, the peace that is in the community. Mm-hmm. And therefore, there's a lot of good to go around just in building relationships with our neighbors, with our coworkers, with the people that we come in contact at the grocery store. That's what makes a great community to me.
Wow, boy. Okay, this is good stuff. All right, so we're going to move on to take a look at community health from another lens. What stands out to you in the American culture that we need to protect and keep as healthy foundations and or practices in our communities?
I think it's that sense, and Carolyn said it well, just how do we, those who are already doing the work, how do we encourage them to do that work so that they're not being burnt out and they feel supported? And we spend so much time telling kids, how to build a safety net of healthy adults around them, who are the people that you can talk to. But I think it's to flip that message for the adults, saying, who are the kids that you're being a safety net for, right? Who are the kids falling through the cracks? Who are the kids who don't have the resources? And what does it look like, not to saviorism, like come in and swoop them out, but like to support their caregiver who's doing 80 things during a pandemic, right? To support our relatives, our neighbors. And so I think it's just that idea of, we live in a culture where it is very me first. It is very, how's this going to impact me? How's this going to impact my family? And I had an argument with a mom years ago teaching internet safety. She's like, it's not my job to get 5 of my kids' friends safely through high school. Like, it's just my job to get my kids safely through high school. I was trying to have the whole, well, there's no such thing as other people's kids, like that. And it wasn't working. And finally I just turned to if your only priority is to get your kids safely through high school, know 4 of his friends, right? If that's the only motivation, be connected. So I think it's about building those connections and finding ways to support people as they're attempting to build healthy connections. And we know any place kids are gathered, people with bad intentions are going to swoop in. So that's why we all need to raise our awareness and do that work so that we can raise healthy kids.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'm so glad that when we were kids, the neighbors did kind of take responsibility for us. And I wasn't happy about it all the time as a kid, being sneaky, trying to do stuff, but that safety net probably really saved me out of a lot of stuff. So I'm grateful that.
My mom used to tell my brothers and I, she's like, I just pray every night, if you do something wrong, you get caught and punished right away. They're like, who prays that? Who prays that? And she's like, well, if you steal a candy bar and you get caught, you're not going to steal a car because you paid the consequence for the candy bar. So I'm just picturing my mom every night, just, my kiddos do something wrong, I pray they get caught right away. I'm like, that's maybe a little bit more than where we need to be. But
I love it. I love it. Okay, so what makes our communities unhealthy? What's going on? I mean, lately, I just heard on the news tonight, there has been over 20 mass shootings in the country in the last month. And that's not including any of the sexual deviance that we know is out there. All that is just the killing, and in many cases, children. So it's kind of a dumb question, what makes our communities unhealthy? But maybe you can help our listeners rethink the health in our communities. What is going on that all of these negative things are happening? Maybe they've been happening for some time, and because it wasn't videotaped or it wasn't on national news, we didn't know about it. But maybe you have some insight on what makes our communities unhealthy.
Talk about these big questions, Evelyn, Dr. Evelyn. I know that we've all probably paid attention to the fact that there have been shootings in other countries, and then right away they make laws and policies that have particular outlawing guns or, other kinds of responses that are maybe kind of like Allison's mom. If it happens once, get it, and then move on. But I think, there's some lessons to learn there, I think. But I don't think that's enough. I mean, I don't think that's the easy answer. I don't think that if there were an easy answer, and if we could come up with the answer here, I think, the angels would sing and other things might happen. But I know that there are a lot of people who are smart people who have been thinking about what mass shootings look like and what, causes them and who shoots, who's the shooter. There's a lot of resistance to the study of mass shooting as well. And there's finances involved in why certain things get included or excluded from the analysis and when. So I think, we just have to continue doing that work. I think there's the kind of macro level on those kind of conversations. But then I think, one-on-one and getting to know your neighbor is real talk, right? In terms of who are people. I mean, some of the stories that we've heard about shooters, they are mad at one thing or another, or they have a particular bent about something. Even the shootings of recent, some have been racialized, some have been targeted towards an affront or some sort of revenge of some kind, and then weapons get used. I'm really curious myself about this shooting I heard about today, where a mom and her three children were killed, and the dad is suspected. He suffered a self-inflicted gunshot wound at the scene as well, but didn't perish. And so, are those mass shootings? I mean, they meet the numbers, but that's usually not how we talk about them. We talk about them as domestic violence or some other kind of frame of analysis. And so I think it's just really important to think about how so many different ways we can analyze what goes wrong sometimes gets in the way of really looking at how can we reach out and do more to be in support of people who are struggling. And so I think, again, there's so much more, Evelyn, that could be said about, just kind of bringing in different perspectives about people and their experiences and what that leads them to kind of conclude. But as a criminologist and someone who's interested in crime committing behavior, and I'll be more clear, it's not the crime committing behavior that I'm particularly interested in. It's how to prevent crime committing behavior that I'm much more interested in. And so, how do we have those conversations that talk about preventing domestic violence, preventing, mass shootings, preventing gun violence? How do we have those conversations about, what we need to do to get there before the shooter takes action or before a domestic situation becomes deadly? So it's not really an answer. I think we just have to keep having conversations and making connections and building resources and support, at least as part of it. I'm sure others have thoughts as well.
Well, I appreciate your comment so much around prevention and how can we get to a conversation where we're able to effectively cause some preventative measures to be taken before all of these horrific incidences happen. How can we, what can we do? So yeah, I love the fact that you brought that up. And Alison, I want to ask you specifically, since you work so well with children, how does a quality conversation around child safety help to make our communities healthy?
If I just take one step back, I know Carolyn, I could see her mouth about to answer.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I want to make sure she has a chance to answer, and then I would love to answer that question. I just want to get her wisdom on this too. So
thank you so much.
I'll defer to Carolyn, and then I'll jump in and answer that.
Okay. Thank you, Allison. I was thinking about that, even at prevention and your question, Evelyn, one thing I think we need to do to prevent is to pay attention. If we pay attention to what's going on in our household and our family units and to our kids in the schools, that could help solve a lot. Sometimes we're turning a blind eye to what's right in front of us. And so I would say pay attention to our environment. And when you see things, speak out. When you see things that are not just, speak out about it instead of being quiet about it. And I think that'll go a long ways to preventing some of the things that we see in front of us right now that are hurting our community.
Awesome, Carolyn. Thank you.
Dovetail on that and go back to your question. I think, and this is me as Allison, private citizen, not Allison, a Zero Abuse Project employee. I just want to delineate those two things because as a mom, we need comprehensive gun control reform. Like that's just
absolutely
we're expecting so much of our kids. Like I was just. It's like, well, how do we talk to kids about gun violence? How do we talk to kids about COVID? It's like our kids have been, I have a child under 5. She's been waiting for a shot for 2 years. Like I've had mine for 2. Anyway, so like we're expecting so much of our kids to do all these sacrifices, take all this on. And then not to mention all the things we're asking of teachers. I see the online, well, let's arm the teachers. Let's train them. Like they're making not enough salary to try to solve all of society's ills. And then we're going to add on that, and also go to the gun range and like law enforcement didn't come in this case, and we're expecting teachers to take that on. So I think we're expecting too much of our kids. We're expecting too much of our teachers. We need to help with the heavy lifting. We need to call our senators. We need to call our representatives and let them know that we as a country can take on gun control. So that's my like mom hat, unrelated
Yes.
to, because that's not one of our
Yes.
that's not one of our big pieces at Zero Abuse Project right now. But we're against child maltreatment in all forms, right? And so part of that
Yes.
is finding the people doing this work and lifting up their voices. Like, I can share the memes that I've read. I can share the Googling that I've done on this. It's not going to be as good as like someone doing this work day in, day out. So the Dr. Jillian Peterson at Hamlin is really phenomenal at doing this work. I hope I have her name right. I'll feel really bad if I
Yes,
later
it
look
is.
I'm wrong. It is.
Jillian.
Okay, good. But I think I just find it the idea of how are we militarizing our young men as a culture in a way that's harming other people, right? Like the Buffalo shooting that was just racist and vile. Like, he was using the internet to fuel his flames for hate, right? The person who was just involved in the Texas shooting apparently threatened a lot of young women online and said to young women he's going to rape and kill them, and they raised the alarm, and it was like, this is just guys being guys on the internet. So I think we do have to look at how we weaponize that young men culture. But again, other countries have mental health issues. Other countries have kids playing video games, and they don't have the same problem that we have. So I think we need to act on behalf of kids and act on behalf of teachers, because it's one thing to have Teacher Appreciation Week and be like, here's your free soft drink, right? And it's another thing to be like, here are the tools that you can safely do your job. And we're not in a country that is giving teachers the tools they need to safely do their job.
That's so true. And Carolyn, I want to just piggyback on something you said earlier about pay attention. Sometimes I have noticed, like going to the grocery stores, the kids are in one part of the store and mom is somewhere else looking at TikTok or something on the phone. And so it would be so good if the parents could pay attention. And we as neighbors could pay attention. And we as community members could pay attention and speak up at the proper time. So I really applaud you for saying that. And Allison, your comments were just stellar and right on point too, as they always are, you and Dr. Clifford. And I like what you said about the teachers are not, elementary school teachers are not paid enough at all to be the social worker, the mom, the dad, the healer.
They're not paid enough, period. Like, let's just say they're not paid enough, period.
Period.
And then we add on the other elements of that. Yeah.
Yes. So how can we in our communities do a paradigm shift by making our communities healthy and safe when it comes to sexual misconduct?
Well, I think one of the things that Allison and I did with the textbooks, remember the book is called Sex Crimes and Offenders, and then the subtitle is Exploring Questions of Character, Individual, and Culture, Collective, right? And so there are those characteristics of individuals that might presuppose certain kinds of things, perhaps, et cetera. But it's also really important to talk about how this culture has evolved, because as Allison has said, we are unique in certain aspects of continuing certain kinds of policies and practices, while other countries have made changes and seen different outcomes as well. But I also want to remember, this is a really complicated question.
Yes.
And we have set up a structure where police also are in danger and in harm's way. And can you pay anyone enough money to run toward an event that's happening when there's a mass shooting, right? And so I think, we have created a situation where public safety is really loosely kind of considered the expert's role, or these people are going to be trained to do the worst kinds of, the most difficult or most harmful kinds of things. but yet we also expect police officers to do mental health kind of schools. And, we put them everywhere to do everything. And so, I'm not by any means defending bad police practice, but I'm
Right.
also wanting to really highlight that we have a power and control kind of tone and tenor in our cultures and in our communities. And so I think for public safety and policing in many cases. And so how do we get back to, years ago, the police was, we wanted the public to be the police and the police to police the public, right? And so
Right.
we wanted to have a dynamic where we were part of the process for public safety, right? As citizens, we became involved with policing protocols and things. And so we have armed and extended and militarized and other kinds of things in response to a rise in violence. And of course, you go back to, what is love and what is hate and how do you respond to hate? And Martin Luther King had some ideas about that, right? I mean, in terms of, love is what is, you can't out hate, right? Love's the only
Right.
response. And so, I've been studying nonviolence. I've been studying other ways of responding to people who are identified in many cases. Sex offenders are identified in many cases as the worst of the worst, right? The worst of the worst kind of offenders. And of course, there's some nuance to that in addition to, how do we talk about families where abuse happens and how do we talk about community conditions where abuse happens. And it is very possible and hard for some of us to understand that a person who could offend against a family member would also be loved by that family member who committed the abuse against them. That's a
Right.
dynamic in our head that we can't, take in fully, some of us, right? And so I think we have to be really careful because the goal is to get healthy people, from kids to adults. But the other goal then is to provide support and assist folks who have committed abuse and harm in a way that is, again, supportive of public safety and supportive of relationship development that's healthy and safe for people. And I also want to just say, particularly, there are some very egregious kinds of abuse, particularly sexual harm, that happens that is inexplicable, and there's absolutely no justification for any kind of sexualized harm. But the nuances around that harm make it tricky, and trying to get support and help from all angles for victims, offenders, families, communities, is just critical. And so I'm not sure we're there yet. I'm not sure we're at the place where we have enough resources for a community, for example, who has an egregious event happen, and they're all just trying to make sense of it. And when a teacher or someone beloved in a community is accused of a crime like this, of committing these kinds of harms, it's hard for communities to adapt. And so I think all of these things become important integrated responses. And so we have to work together to create those, because they're not always there, thank God, because we don't always need them, right?
Thank you, Dr. Clifford. I just want to throw in a couple more questions. One has to do with church gathering places and other places. How can those types of places participate in creating a new healthy community initiative that is different from the past? Because like Dr. Clifford said earlier, how do you really know the profile of someone who would harm a child or an adult sexually? Is it a certain look in their eye? Is it the way they wear their hair? There is no way to really identify. So how can church and other gathering places participate in creating a new healthy community initiative that is different from the past, where many people have experienced sexual deviance from leadership? What can we do?
I don't know if any of you have read the SBC report that came out last week from the Southern Baptist Convention. They hired a neutral third-party investigator to look through at how this has been handled. And I'm a 1/3 through the 200, 300-page report. It's devastating. I think one of my favorite things about the work I do is empowering faith communities to take on prevention, because when you can make it manageable, when you can make it theological, like when they see the theology of this is why, if we say, let the children come unto me, what does that look like? Like if we say do justice, love kindness, walk humbly, like what does that mean? And it does not mean what is written all over that report, which is we don't want to be liable, so we're going to slander anyone who comes forward. And I'm not of the Southern Baptist persuasion, so for me to read the report and just jump right away to like pulling my hair out, there are wonderful advocates in that denomination who have been blowing the whistle for years and years and years and saying, I came forward and this is how I was treated. This is how my husband was treated. This is how our family was treated. This is how we're ostracized. And seeing in black and white that this was a strategy of, we want to make any survivor coming forward, make them feel like that they're not listened to, make them feel like that they are evil, make them feel, and it gives me more energy to do the work. And I'm neck deep in it, but we have a long way to go. We have a long way to go because people don't want to believe that. Well, I'll say one more thing and I'll pat Carolyn. I feel bad. I feel like years ago, I was at a conference about the institutional response to abuse. And the researcher was saying that just in general, not really abuse, the more loyal you feel to an organization, the more you want to help cover up anything bad that organization has done or any of their members are out of loyalty. And they're trying to make a paradigm shift in our country and in the world where the more loyal you are to the organization, that you're the first one saying, here's a little problem before it becomes a big problem, right? If you really want people to join Girl Scouts and you had an awesome Girl Scout experience, be the one involved in training, be the one involved in preventing, be the one involved in policy, and be the person when you say like, oh, wait, you're not supposed to text a youth one-on-one. You have to loop in their parents, like that because you're loyal, as opposed to what has been our tradition in our country is if you're loyal, keep your mouth shut. Especially in faith communities, we see that. And just the paradigm shift of, if you believe that your faith community is doing the right thing for kids, be the first person to say, hey, we don't give back rubs in the church parish hall, like, or whatever it is. So I think that, I think it's about ownership, and I think it's a shift in how we look at loyalty. And I think it's a question of theology. If you say that all major religions have the love thy neighbor as thyself, it's not inherent. Christianity is not the only people who own that, right? So like, if love your neighbor as yourself comes across in all of the major religious texts, how are the kids? Like, so how are the kids? If that's what you believe, show me the kids. Tell me how you're doing with the kids. And we still have so much to do there in prevention and response. And I get very heartened working with faith leaders who are going to go out and do it right. And that keeps me doing this work. But oh my gosh, it is. I don't know if you've read this report from last week, but it is very, very painful. And I honor the survivors who kept pushing for decades and kept telling their truth, because that is a huge shift in how, it's painful.
Thank you, Allison. And maybe you can allow us an opportunity to share that information that you just shared about the report. If there's a way or a link or something.
It's everywhere. It's Washington Post, New York Times, Christianity
Washington
Today.
Post. Okay.
It's all the places. Absolutely.
Well, and I just want to also add that the Southern Baptist Conference is not the only church group or faith community that has had a huge, I'm just thinking of the Catholic Church and lawsuit after lawsuit and survivor after survivor, and yoga communities that have also had abuse cycles. I just want to highlight that
I'm banging my head against the wall multiple times. If you're a person of faith and you belong, and churches and mosques and synagogues are not abuse proof, and we're never gonna, we're working to get it right, but Carolyn, what are your thoughts? I want to make sure.
Boy, y'all give me so much to think about. Okay. I think when you're talking about the church and what the church can do, one of the examples at the church I'm going to now is the pastor. At one point in time, a couple or two couples had ended up having adulterous relationships, and the pastor called them out on it. He said, these are the people, this is what they did. We're going to offer restoration for them, but we want you to know that this is not going to go on in our church without something being said about it. So you have to say something. It was harsh to me for him to call out these people's names that had relationships that were not appropriate in his leadership. Not just not the people in the church, but these were on his leadership team. So he called them out, and they had to go to, try to restore marriages and get their relationships back on the right path. When it comes to children, like Dr. Clifford said, and you, Allison, too, this not just in the Baptist church or it's been in the Catholic Church, it's everywhere. I do think if people would say something more, this would stop. I think if they would start calling out these preachers' names and stuff, a lot of this would stop. But so much of it, again, is under the cover. So I can tell you a little bit about church things, because I've been in church all my life, and I had some things happen to me in the church. And it's when you say it's the people that love you, it's your friends, it's the people that are around you. Some of these people are predators and you don't even know it. So the thing that happened to me, one of the things that happened to me is a pastor at our church. He was not the church that I go to now. A long time ago when I was a teenager, he invited me into his office and he said, I would like to be your friend. And so I'm a teenager. I'm like, wow, the pastor of the church wants to be my friend. And he said, I'd like to take you out to dinner and we can have a conversation and all that. And so we went out to dinner. The next thing I know, I'm at his apartment and he's trying to have a sexual relationship with me. The thing that stopped him is he figured out I had never had sex before. I didn't even know, and he could tell I didn't really understand what he was doing to me. And then to kind of relieve himself, he pleasured himself in front of me, something that I had never seen before, and went on. Afterwards, I went home and I'm like, man, did that just happen? What is this? Mm-hmm. But then when you go back into the church, and I didn't tell anybody what had happened. And then when you go back to church the next Sunday or something, then that preacher is ready to say all kind of wonderful things about you, and God's going to do this and God's going to do that for you. And I'm thinking, wow, look at what just happened here. And again, I was just too young. And I want to say when things like that happen to teenagers and to young kids, it's a secret. It's like, this is something that I'm not supposed to tell anybody about. And we hold on to that until we get older. And then it's like, this is what happened to me. So in protecting the church, for the church to offer protection, it's like, if you see something, you have to say something. And I know with kids, they used to have this thing called stranger danger. We have to go back into that, and we have to go back into educating children and even teenagers more about inappropriate touching. What is inappropriate? And don't be afraid to tell somebody what happened. I was afraid to tell my dad or my parents because I thought my dad might go kill this person, so I'm like, I'm definitely not going to tell him what happened.
I'm so sorry that happened to you. I mean, that's and you, as you said, abuse thrives in secrecy, right? And most kids don't tell for like a decade after it happens, because who do I tell who's going to leave me over them? I feel like I've done something wrong, all those kinds of messages. And I think we do our kids a disservice when we don't talk about this openly, honestly, and regularly. Not so much about do we know the person or not, because as you like in almost every case, we know the person and we often like them. But like, have you ever had someone try to break your body safety rules? Has anyone that our family likes asked you to keep a secret about touches? Like to make it ongoing and easy, because no kid should have to hold that in their heart and in their shoulder. And then we add the religious dynamic to it. It's like, if you're abused during swimming lessons, you're going to be mad at the swim coach, right? If you're abused in your faith community, what does that do for some survivors that they cling even closer to their faith because their faith helps them get through something like that? For other people, then they reject their faith. And it's a whole gamut of all of them. But I think the idea is less about, the idea is honoring survivors and saying never again, right? Never again. Let's get ahead of this and let's make sure no other kid has to live this, right? And we do that through policies so that, we do it through training, we do it through screening, we do it through monitoring, like we do it, there's a whole, it's not a one person job. And if we put one person in the church in charge of this, people are really good at hiding things from that one person, right? So it's about raising the awareness of everybody and to pay attention when survivors speak up, because they have a superpower. They've lived it. They're going to see it before anyone else. And so, and not to be like, oh, well, I've been told many times in my life, well, you just work in a job where you have to think about this all the time. But most people don't think about this all the time. It's like, oh, yep, I'm noticing this pattern and I'm going to talk about this pattern. And instead of discounting, being like, well, you were abused, so therefore it's like, yeah, I was. And so that's why listen to me times two, right? So I think, our agency does a training called Keeping Faith, where we train leaders in a 2-day intensive workshop that's very like explore learning. It gets into a lot of stuff about scripture, and I think it's always very heartening to see people leaving with the tools they said they wish they would have had their first year working at a parish. And like, the more that we can equip people to not be the problem, the better, especially in faith communities.
Well, and if I could just also, what some of the things that Carolyn raises is really important to kind of just take a small kind of reflect back, because we started with stranger danger. And when my daughter was 3, I got yelled at Target by my daughter, who said, Mom, you're not supposed to talk to that, because I was talking to the checkout person at Target. My daughter saw through that right away. I mean, at some point, often it's not the stranger that we have to worry about in terms of sexual relationships. And Carolyn's example is a perfect one. It's teachers, or it's someone close to us, close to the family, maybe in our family, et cetera. So this idea that stranger danger is going to help us protect against sexual violence is a little bit offbeat. And then we come up with another protocol, which was good touch, bad touch. And that's so confusing for kids, because good touch is good for kids, right? Snuggling up and loving and, patting kids on the back and sitting on grandpa's lap. All those things are good, healthy things for kids until it's not, right? The idea that you could be touched in a way that's inappropriate, that feels good, is very confusing, because we need to be really clear about what's okay touch and what's not okay touch, because good and bad is so subjective. And, it feels good to be receiving attention from someone you have regard for, right? And so even if it's not the touching thing, it's emotional stuff. And when we talk about grooming or getting someone more and more comfortable with the person so that that person can abuse the person, the intention is very clear. The process is a set of stages, and it may take quite a bit of time to reach that level of familiarity and comfort to go ahead and abuse a child in that way. But I think it's just really important to kind of reflect back on what we've learned by putting some of these programs in place about how we meet kids where they are, how we meet community members where they are. And then again, as Allison says, if it's secret, it's a problem. If you're not talking to people that you know and trust, it's a problem. And if you're being taught to say some things but not other things, that's a problem. And so how do you understand your own body, and how do you understand what's okay, for your own developmental age. And I think that's another conversation. Some kids are ready at different ages. And so it's very difficult to have conversations broadly when you're looking at your 12-year-old and she says something like, hey, mom, what's this word? Or, hey, mom, what's that mean? Or, I'm doing this thing. I'm having sex. Well, she's not having sex because what she told you sex was is wrong. That's not what sex is. But at the same time, you have to have these kind of ongoing conversations about what it does mean to have sex. And when that's age appropriate, parents are going to disagree, educators are going to disagree, communities are going to disagree. And so I think, as Allison has said already, it takes a village, right? It takes a lot of people to pull those pieces together in terms of how we create programming to help educate kids and different aged kids and parents who are parenting kids of different ages, right? All those things along the way. Like when your kid's 7, you think you got it figured out. They turn to be 11 and you're like, oh my God, what happened? And then you got to figure it out again, right? So there's a lot to say around
and
that.
life gives you lots of options to have these conversations. My 4-year-old daughter was listening to Beauty and the Beast in the car, and she's like, Gaston's voice is so nice, but he's not good. So someone can sound nice and not be a good person. And I'm like, pull over the car, like, okay, let's have, nice people are different than good people. And let's talk about Gaston sounds so nice. He's really mean to Belle. It's like, yeah, let's talk. And so I think it can be age appropriate, but that idea again of not putting it on the kids, like that Carolyn shouldn't have had to live that and shouldn't have had to be the one putting that on her shoulders and feeling like that was, that wasn't fair to her by any means. It's like, how can we create a culture where the person sees something when she's going into the office, saying something, letting, So I just think that idea about even kids, they don't have to know if it's a good touch or of what kind of touch it is. Like we don't say good, bad anymore because it's, as Dr. Clifford says, confusing. But the phrase we use is talk about touches.
Yes.
So in our family, we talk about touches. Like touches are never secret. We talk about them. And if you want to know if it's clean and healthy or if it's something else, let's talk about it. You shouldn't have to figure out when you're 5 or 15, is this what just happened? In our family, we talk about touches.
So what do you do when if you were a child and you said something, but nobody did anything? I would like to hear your input on that. What if the child comes and tells you, but there's no results? What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, we live in a broken system that we're continually trying to get upstream from. If we talk to kids about who are your 5 people on your safety net, because sometimes it's the person on the net who's breaking your rules, to who are your 4 more. Sometimes the first person you don't know can't help you. And so who are your 4 more? And so helping them find their safety net, helping them find someone, if it's happening at home, who's someone outside of the home. And then it's up to those of us who are frontline professionals to make sure that we're trained in doing a proper forensic interview, to make sure that we're trained in doing a trauma-informed investigation, to make sure we're trained in trauma-informed prosecution so that this child isn't having to tell their story 80 times to 80 different people before they get a response. That the first time that they make an outcry, we're going to surround you with all the people who are ready to go, who know what they're doing, who can figure out what's next. And too much in our field, the tradition has been, you can have the kid cases until you know what you're doing. And then when you really know what you're doing, we'll give you the adult cases. Like, no, like my colleague, Victor Veith, who is like a visionary in child abuse prevention, it's just like, no, when you're really good, you get the kid cases. And when you're really, and there are people really, really doing the work, right? So it is about help giving that young person tools and words that they can disclose, making sure that the adults are trained so that when they do disclose, they get a positive response, training parents in teachable safety skills so that they can have ongoing conversations, that the child doesn't feel like they have to take this on, and then raising up community leaders, educators, other folks, collaborative networks, so that they're hearing this from their soccer coach, that no one has the right to hurt them. They're hearing this from their faith leader. So there's multiple people they can go to for help and not feeling backed into a corner and stuck. And I think we have to do all. It's like when we're doing body safety in an elementary school, yep, let's do body safety. Let's make sure the teachers know how to handle a disclosure. Let's make sure that the parents know how to talk about touches. Let's make all that information really accessible for folks. And we're not there yet. I'm never going to be like, oh, our system is fixed. We're great. We're on top. That's the goal. That's the finish line, so that no child feels re-victimized by what has already happened to them.
Right.
Well, and I wanted,
ladies,
I'm sorry, Evelyn, do we need to go?
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we just need to be reminded that families need support, communities need support, classrooms need support. If something happens in a particular circumstance, Allison said this, I just want to reiterate it. The idea that you have support around that child means that the parents of the child also have support and help to understand how a person who has been harmed responds to that harm. And so if that response is varied, and it will be, when we look at how those pieces come together, we need to make sure that the parents can help the child wherever they are, and that the parents have support and can reach out as they need help so that they can, really land in a healthy place. Because it can be traumatic for a lot of people who are secondary kind of trauma impacted. And this also goes for police and other kinds of first responders who are confronted with the abuse and having to interview kids and to see this kind of abuse. Sometimes, those folks need support and help as well if they're going to stay healthy in the work. So there's just a lot of that.
And Carolyn, I have a question for you, and you do not have to answer it. I'm just curious, when you did disclose, were you given support?
I think by the time I disclosed, I was an adult. I was an adult at that time, so I didn't need the support. I had kind of figured it out. It's like, okay, we just put that on the back burner. And I guess the answer to that question would be no. No, I didn't really receive support, and I don't know if anybody could have done anything to help me except maybe talk and reassure me a little bit. So.
Because even just hearing this should not have happened to you, it's not your fault. This is what this means. We teach little ones. We say, if you meet someone who doesn't know the rules about bodies, not your fault, not your issue. You've met someone who doesn't know the rules about bodies, that's on them. Find someone who does know the rules about bodies and tell it to them, right? So it's that idea. But anytime someone goes through something like this, it's like, what was I doing? What was I saying? What was I wearing? What was I? That's how our brains work, because we're trying to prevent this from happening to ourselves again. We are our own worst critic, even though none of this is on you that this happened. Like, it's all on the responsibility of this person who used his position of power. And if you haven't heard it lately, have absolutely nothing. You did absolutely nothing wrong, and this should not have happened to you. And I'm sad that this happened to you. And I think that it's really powerful that you continue to find ways to be a voice for change, because we need people who get it and who have that as part of their the way that they see the world.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you.
Ladies, this has been an incredible conversation, and I want to thank each of you. Carolyn, thank you so much for sharing your story and for your transparency. And I think there are thousands of individuals out there just like you who did not have the support, who weathered that storm alone, not knowing where to go or what do you talk about, just a secret forever. So thank you for letting that cat out the bag and for allowing us to learn as we continue with in our communities to build a healthy community. How can we help our kids? How can we help women and men and boys and girls and teachers and police officers? We all are a part of the community. So this has been a powerful conversation. And we are just about out of time. And I'd like for Mary and Allison and Carolyn, you all to have final words, and then we will meet again.
I would just say that if the people causing sexual harm are all genders, all races, all socioeconomic groups, all ethnicities, so all of us need to be around the table when we talk about prevention. Like we need to find on-ramps for people in their own spheres of influence to say, well, I might not feel comfortable being a sexual assault advocate, but I can talk to my kids at soccer about why we're going to respect bodies at practice, right? Like in ways that are appropriate and where they feel supported to do that. We need all folks engaged in helping us raise kids. We want to build a world worthy of its kids. We can do that but it's going to take everybody putting kids first. And child safety never used to be politicized. Like it was just, yep, kids deserve to be safe. And in the last few years, that's on its head as well. So just to put the priority on how the kids are doing and what the kids need, and go teachers. That's my final sentence.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure, much more to say. I will just express gratitude for the conversation, Evelyn, for you, and Carol, of course, Carolyn, for you, for sharing your story. But I just can't say enough about how many of us are impacted by this. Maybe our own lives, maybe our children's lives, maybe our parents' lived experience that we never knew about, friends, classmates, people in our faith community, for sure, others, other areas. So I just think we've got to be really absolutely connected to how to do this better, and how to listen better, and how to hear both young boys or young girls, young people, teenagers, and young couples who are trying to figure out what is the healthy way, So there's a lot of distractions in the world, and our job is to really help kids kind of focus in on what is going to be healthy so that they can determine for themselves how they want to move forward in a way that's respected. And so, that's no easy task. And I know that our goal would be that no child ever be harmed. And yet we also know that that's going to potentially happen. And what do we do in response? Because we do see some better outcomes with kids who get support and help. Parents and families get support and help. We do see better outcomes for them in the long term. And so, I just know that there are a lot of folks who do this work every day who leave their jobs with PTSD and have their own experience of trauma and harm, because none of us want to see people suffer, right? And so we want to do the best we can to help minimize that and to respond in a healthy way should we be confronted with it. So there's just so much to say. And Evelyn, I'm grateful to you for just helping us kind of keep the conversation going and just kind of catch another nuance as we move through the next one. But thank you again.
Oh, you are so welcome. Miss Carolyn?
Well, first, I want to say thank you for allowing me to be in the room with you ladies. It's been my pleasure to listen. I'm hoping from the experience that we had here, if people hear this, that they will kind of get more engaged in listening to the conversation. How many times, I probably never had the opportunity to be in the room with you counselors, and it's so enlightening and empowering to hear you all speak about what your experiences, the wisdom, the knowledge that's coming from you all is just amazing. I'm glad to be in the room with y'all. I'm glad to hear what you're saying. And maybe that if other people hear the podcast, they'll say, oh, these are the counselors. This is what I needed to hear from them. And I'm excited that I had an opportunity to be a part of the conversation.
Well, Carolyn, thank you so much. And Dr. Clifford is one of the professors at St. Cloud State, and Allison was one of the students at St. Cloud State University. And you want to show the book again, Dr. Clifford?
Well, I just wanted, sometimes people like a visual, and this is the cover. And again, I want to just say that our intention was to look at individual character and the kind of integrated kind of action of those cultural influences, and how we can talk about both of those things and how each of us can take responsibility, whether as a victim advocate, or an offender advocate. I'm not saying people who advocate offending. I'm saying people who support people who have committed offenses. And we all need to, kind of find our way through a collective, complete response as a community. And so those are hard questions, and we need more conversations.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, ladies, thank you again for being a part of Shades in Justice podcast. What an awesome, awesome evening. All right. Have a great day. We will see you soon.